Bikini Bottom has been destroyed many times. In Wormy, the entire town burned down. In Dying for Pie, the entire town exploded. And in Sandy, Spongebob, and the Worm, everything got crushed by the Alaskan bullworm. Honestly, there are too many individual instances of Bikini Bottom being destroyed to name. But I bet you've never asked yourself how much time and money it would cost to rebuild Bikini Bottom. Well, luckily for you, I asked myself that question because I'm special and I did all the work for you. So all you have to do is sit back and relax while I go over the numbers. First, we need to know exactly how big is Bikini Bottom. What's the population, how many buildings there are, things like that. I'm actually going to make a separate video on this where I go into a much deeper dive on it, so subscribe if you want to see that, maybe. I don't know, just saying. But for now, I'm just going to use some rather rough estimates. Exactly how big Bikini Bottom is has never really been that clear or consistent throughout the show. In Who Bob What Pants, we see a population sign where it says, like Bikini Bottom population 538, but I'm not buying that. I think Bikini Bottom is a little bit bigger than that. According to the SpongeBob TV wiki, Bikini Bottom has a population of 50,000 people, with the urban metro area having a population of 4.5 million. But that doesn't really make that much sense to me either, and I think they're including the jellyfish in that, because in one of the episodes we see the jellyfish fields population and it's like 4 million or something, I'm pretty sure. So I don't know what's going on there, but either way, that doesn't really make a ton of sense to me either. Anyways, here is a common wide shot of Bikini Bottom. As we can see, there are a few dozen buildings with bigger ones in the center of town, and then there's a few random ones kind of out on the outskirts. However, we know that this is not the entire town because we cannot see Conch Street, for example. We can't see Mr. Krabs' house. We can't see the Krusty Krab or the Chum Bucket. There's a lot of important places that are missing. So we kind of have to take a few liberties here. I personally have always just kind of assumed that Bikini Bottom was a fairly small city spread out over a very big area. Kind of like Juneau, Alaska, the largest city in the United States by land area, but only has a population of a little over 30,000 people. So to make things just a little bit easier for me in this video and to bring in a real world example, I'm going to compare Bikini Bottom to Paradise, California. Welcome to Paradise! Paradise became a rather famous town because the whole place burned down in the 2018 campfire. And before the fire, the town had a population of about 26,000 people. So that is more or less the number that we are going to use for this video. The reason I'm using Paradise as a measuring stick for Bikini Bottom is because the campfire basically destroyed the entire town, and we know exactly how many buildings were lost, and we have real-world numbers as to how much it cost to rebuild and all that stuff, so it just seemed like a perfect allegory. So it just seemed like a good natural fit, just like me and your mom. The campfire destroyed a little over 19,000 structures, but some of those were not within Paradise city limits. That being said, though, over 90% of the town did burn down, and it was the largest community affected by the fire. So I'm just going to roughly estimate that 15,000 of those buildings were in Paradise. With that number representing 95% of the town's entire number of structures, that would mean that there's about 16,000 buildings before the fire. So that's the number we're going to use for Bikini Bottom. We're going to estimate that Bikini Bottom has about 16,000 buildings. So now we need to know, how much does it cost to rebuild all of those buildings? I'm going to assume that most of the infrastructure remains intact each time Bikini Bottom is destroyed, so we're not factoring in the cost to repair things like roads and power lines. But generally speaking, we're not talking about minor or even moderate damage. The most common way Bikini Bottom gets destroyed is by explosion. And you may have noticed the show uses the same clip for many of these explosions. Yeah, that is the Baker nuclear bomb test. Here's the full video of it. Okay, so actually, they kind of only use this particular clip 3 times in the show, but they do use other footage of other nuclear explosions like a couple of times, so it's a fairly common occurrence for the city. Now, I think that there are 2 main reasons why they chose to use the Baker nuclear bomb footage for the show. First, the footage is just absolutely spectacular. It's one of the best videos of a nuclear bomb exploding that exists, in my humble opinion. But also, arguably the more important reason is that Baker was actually detonated underwater. After World War II, the United States did a shit ton of nuclear weapons testing, much of which occurred at Bikini Atoll, which is why those theories about Spongebob being the result of nuclear fallout exist. But the Baker nuclear test was actually not done at Bikini Atoll. It was done in the Marshall Islands, contrary to what it says on the official SpongeBob Wikipedia. So they got that one wrong. Anyways, Baker was a plutonium bomb, basically the exact same bomb as Fat Man, which was a 23 kiloton bomb that we dropped on Nagasaki at the end of World War II. Which means now I have to explain what a kiloton is in a video about SpongeBob SquarePants. I did not have that one on my bingo card when I started this channel. The thing is, though, kilotons is a really stupid measurement. It's one of the most American coded measurements that exists, right up there with horsepower and acre-foot. Anyways, a kiloton is equal to 1,000 tons of TNT. Now, 1 ton of TNT releases 4.2 gigajoules of energy, but a kiloton releases 4.2 terajoules of energy. And 1 terajoule is 4.2 times 10 to the 12th. And 1 joule of energy is the amount of work done by 1 Newton acting through 1 meter. So whatever the hell that is, times 4.2 trillion, that's how much energy is in a kiloton. Which means this explosion, boom, had the force of 96.6 trillion newtons acting on 96.6 meters or something. I don't really know. I haven't taken a math class since I was in high school, and I'm also not a nuclear physicist or a scientist of any kind. But the important thing to know is that this energy released a ton of energy. Get it? Get it? Ton? Because kilo, ton. I think a much quicker and more effective way to show you how much energy this is to just show you pictures of the aftermath of Fat Man being dropped on Nagasaki. Most of you watching this have probably seen pictures of Hiroshima, and you probably learned about it in high school. Or if you're currently in high school, maybe you haven't learned about it yet, but whatever. Hiroshima gets all the attention, and Nagasaki kind of gets forgotten about, which is honestly a shame because it was a very significant tragedy in its own right. There aren't really any solid official numbers on how many people died in the explosions, both at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but the rough estimates are that 60 to 80,000 Japanese civilians were killed in the immediate impact of the blast, as well as 150 Japanese soldiers and a few American prisoners of war as well, which is probably something they didn't teach you about in high school, is it? As I said, though, these are just the numbers for the initial impact. Who knows how many more people died of cancers related to fallout and exposure just to the blast itself over the decades following the war. Anyways, my point is I think it's safe to say that if this is the same bomb that is being detonated in Bikini Bottom, that the entire town would be wiped out every single time. All 16,000 buildings gone. Everything needs to be rebuilt from scratch. So actually, yeah, we are going to include infrastructure costs in this calculation. There is a slight problem with this logic, though, and that is that no one ever dies in Bikini Bottom. So that would mean that the explosion or explosions on the show are actually way weaker than they would be in real life. But I'm just going to chalk that one up to cartoon magic. In order to find out how much this would cost, I did some research into how much it has cost to rebuild Paradise so far, and according to Google's AI overview, the cost to rebuild a home depends on its size, builder, and design details. Thanks, Google. Very helpful. In all seriousness, though, I was able to find some good data on how much it has cost to rebuild the town so far, and honestly, I was blown away. Rebuilding the town's sewer system alone is projected to cost nearly $250 million, 230 million to be specific. And that's something that I didn't even realize needed to be replaced after the fire. Butte County, which is where Paradise is, has already allocated 100 million to infrastructure projects rebuilding the town, but that does not even include an additional 43 million in unfunded projects. At this point, I will say that all the data that I'm using from this video is as of October 2023. That's the most recent data that I could find. Finally, just over $790 million in disaster recovery grants have been allocated to the communities affected by the campfire, most of that going to Paradise. Now, it is possible, if not likely, that even more money has since been allocated to this rebuilding effort, but as I said, October 23 is the most recent numbers I could find, so that's what we're working with. So, I'm not great at math, but I believe this means that so far it has cost $1,160,000,000 to rebuild Paradise. So, has the town fully recovered? Yeah, not really. Look, in real life, these things take time. It might take a decade or longer for Paradise to get back to where it was before the fire. And that's assuming that another fire doesn't just come right through there and destroy the town again, which is very possible. Quite frankly, many of the people who lived there will never return. And there are still many recovery projects that have yet to be funded. And typically, these things do tend to go over budget. So I'm going to estimate that at the end of the day, it's going to cost roughly $1.5 trillion to rebuild Paradise. Therefore, that is the number that I'm going to be using for Bikini Bottom. So every time the town gets destroyed, it costs $1.5 trillion to fix it. So just how many times has Bikini Bottom been destroyed exactly? Well, the official Spongebob YouTube channel does have a video about this, and they list 21 instances. The official Spongebob wiki states that the town has been destroyed at least 11 times, but they list 25 actual events. So 25 is a nice even round number, so that's the number that I'm going to use. I understand that all of these different events on the show are not exactly the same, and some would cost more to fix than others. But hey, this is a YouTube video about a talking sponge nuking his hometown. Like, it's not that serious. Before I get to the final number, though, I do want to briefly talk about how long it would take to make all these repairs. Obviously, Bikini Bottom has that cartoon magic, so they can just seemingly instantaneously repair everything overnight and go back to normal the next day. But assuming they were actually affected by the laws of physics, yeah, basically Bikini Bottom would never get rebuilt. Going back to our example with Paradise, by the end of October 2023, just 21% of the buildings that had been destroyed were rebuilt. So basically, it took 5 years to rebuild roughly a fifth of the town. Extrapolating that out over more time, then one would imagine that it would take basically 25 years to completely rebuild the town. That isn't exactly how things work, but again, this isn't that serious. So if Bikini Bottom was destroyed 25 times, and every time it was destroyed it took 25 years to rebuild, that would be 625 years of rebuilding. Thank Neptune for cartoon magic, right?
Neptune stirred up quite a gale tonight. He must be mad about something.
That's silly. Everyone knows Poseidon is ruler of the undersea.
And now, the moment you've all been waiting for. The total cost to rebuild Bikini Bottom 25 times would be 37.5 trillion USD dollars. For a bit of perspective, that is the annual GDP of the United States, Germany, and Japan combined. That's a lot of USD dollars. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. I had a ton of fun making it. If you really liked it, I'll put another one on screen now for you to maybe click on if you want. That's all for this one. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. And always, never forget to be yourself.